Chapter 3. The world was falling apart. Ethan Matthews sat on the edge of his couch, gripping the old, worn Bible in his hands. It had belonged to his wife, Claire. He had retrieved it from Claire's Bible basket that she kept put away in the hall entry closet every evening before bed when she would pick up the living room. In that basket was always her Bible, a pack of sticky notes, a notepad, pens, highlighters, and whatever Bible study she'd been working through at that time. Looking at it, tracing the lettering on the front of her Bible cover, a gift he had given her many years ago, how he longed to go backward in time to dig into the Word together with her. The words blurred as he fought the burning in his eyes. She had tried to tell him. She had warned him for years that this moment would come, that Christ would return like a thief in the night, that those who truly belonged to him would be taken, leaving behind only those who had not surrendered their hearts. Ethan had believed in the way that a man believes something because it's convenient. He had gone to church, bowed his head at the right times, even prayed before meals. But now, as he sat in the silence of their home, in his home, now empty of Claire and Emily, he knew the truth. Believing in God was not enough. The rapture had come and gone, and he had been left behind. A soft rustling broke the silence. Ethan looked up to see his son Daniel standing in the doorway. The boy's dark eyes were red-rimmed, his small frame tense with uncertainty. He hadn't spoken much since that night, since Emily and Claire vanished before their eyes. Ethan forced himself to speak. "You okay, buddy?" Daniel shrugged. "There's nothing left to eat." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Food was already becoming scarce. The first night had been chaos, people running through the streets, screaming in confusion, sirens blaring. Within hours, stores had been looted. Those who had lost family members in the vanishing had turned their grief into desperation and rage. Now, 2 weeks later, the world was no longer panicked. It was preparing, and Ethan knew what was coming next. He had spent every moment since the rapture reading Claire's Bible, scouring every passage about the end times, the Antichrist, the Tribulation. 7 years of horror, beginning with false peace and ending in complete destruction. The world was standing at the edge of abyss, and soon it would begin to descend into hell. But first, a leader would rise, and Ethan had already heard the name. The face of the future. The static-filled voice on the radio had announced him only hours earlier. Adrian Lucero. His name was everywhere now, spoken in hushed, reverent tones. He had been an unknown politician only a few weeks ago, but in the wake of the disappearances, he had stepped forward as a beacon of hope. He had answers. He had a plan for the future, and people were listening. The world was desperate for leadership, and Lucero was stepping into that role with an ease that made Ethan's stomach churn. The reports on the emergency broadcast described new world alliances, promises of peace, economic stability, and a global system that would ensure the survival of mankind. The entire world was being reshaped overnight. Ethan exhaled slowly and turned to Daniel. "Come on, let's go find something to eat." The boy nodded, but his movements were sluggish, as if exhaustion had seeped into his bones. Ethan understood. Losing Claire and Emily had taken something from both of them, but grief was not a luxury that they could afford. Not anymore. The streets of a new world. The world outside was not one that Ethan had ever known. Smoke curled into the sky from burned-out bridges, remnants of the riots that had erupted after the disappearances. The faces of those left behind were hollow, haunted. Some wandered aimlessly, calling out names of loved ones who would never answer. Others moved with purpose, looters, opportunists, people who had embraced the collapse as a chance to take whatever they wanted. Ethan kept Daniel close as they made their way to what had once been their local grocery store. Most of the food was gone, but there were always scraps left behind, things people overlooked in their panic. The glass doors were shattered, the interior dark and ransacked. Ethan stepped over a pile of discarded packaging, scanning the aisles. A single dented can of peaches lay half-written beneath an overturned shelf. He grabbed it quickly, shoving it into his backpack. Daniel's voice was soft. "Dad, look." Ethan followed his gaze to the front of the store. A television hung from the ceiling, its screen flickering with the distorted image of a news anchor. Adrian Lucero's face filled the screen. "In these dark times, we must stand together. The world has changed, but we will rise stronger than ever before. A new era has begun, and I promise you, peace is coming." The broadcast cut to a massive crowd. People gathered in what looked like a stadium cheering as Lucero spoke. Daniel shifted uneasily. They believe him. Ethan nodded grimly. Of course they do. He's telling them exactly what they want to hear. A cold feeling settled in his gut. Lucero was not just some politician filling a superpower vacuum. He was fulfilling prophecy, and the worst was yet to come. A coming choice. The air inside the house was still heavy with silence when they returned. Daniel sat at the table, pushing a spoon through the syrupy peaches. He barely ate. Ethan understood. How could anyone eat when the world was falling apart? His finger brushed over the cover of Claire's Bible, and his heart clenched. He had been left behind, but he had one last chance, a chance to make things right, a chance to stand for Christ, even if it cost him everything, a chance to save Daniel, because soon a choice would be forced upon them. The government was already making new identification requirements. A global currency system was being formed. Within days, maybe weeks, everyone would be required to swear allegiance to this new world order. Ethan had read warnings in Revelation. The mark of the beast would soon come, and when it did, he would have to choose. The world above, heaven's unfolding plan. Claire's breath caught as light exploded around her, brighter than the sun, yet soft as a whisper. She had felt it, the shift, the pull, the moment that she had left behind the broken world below. One instant she'd been standing in the kitchen drinking her cup of coffee and talking to Ethan, and in the next she was here, in heaven. Emily's small hand gripped hers, wide, innocent eyes taking in the golden expanse stretching before them. The air was alive, pulsing with an indescribable warmth, as if every breeze carried the whispered voice of God. They stood on a vast plain of emerald grass that shimmered like glass beneath their feet. Rivers of light flowed beside them, reflecting colors Claire had never seen on earth. In the distance, a city rose, its walls made of gemstones, its gates towering and open, but none of it compared to the presence that surrounded them. Claire turned, and there he was, Jesus, the one she had loved and served, the one she had prayed to on nights when the world felt too heavy, the one she had longed to see face to face. He stood before her, radiant, his eyes full of fire and love. And the moment their gazes met, Claire fell to her knees. Every burden, every sorrow, every earthly struggle melted away. "My Lord," she whispered, tears spilling down her face. A gentle hand lifted her chin, and his voice, rich as thunder, soft as a lullaby, spoke directly to her soul. "Rise, my beloved." The words sang through her, filling every empty place. The weight of sin, the weariness of years spent in a fallen world, all of it was gone. She was home. Beside her, Emily let out a small, delighted gasp. "Mommy, look!" Claire turned just in time to see the multitude arriving. Millions of souls filled the horizon, appearing in waves of light. They arrived in a breath and in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Some fell to their knees, overcome. Others laughed in pure, unfiltered joy. The air filled with songs sung by angelic voices, songs so powerful that every note vibrated in the depths of Claire's spirit. She turned, expecting to see Jackson, her brother, who had died years ago, but he was not there. And then the realization struck her once again. Neither was Ethan or Daniel. Claire's breath caught. The warmth of heaven did not fade, but a deep ache formed in her chest. She turned back to Jesus, her voice trembling. Ethan, Daniel, they aren't here. The sorrow in his eyes was not cruel or condemning. It was the sorrow of one who had already borne the weight of the world's sin. They were not ready, he said, but their story is not over yet. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. Please tell me they will make it. Jesus held her gaze. Come. And suddenly they were no longer in the fields of heaven, but standing at the edge of eternity itself. Below them, stretched out like vast canvas, was earth, and it was unraveling. The divide between heaven and earth. Emily clutched Claire's hand as they watched the world unravel. Beneath them, the earth was a storm of chaos. Buildings crumbled. Fires raged. People screamed in grief as they searched for loved ones who had vanished in the blink of an eye. And yet, even in the middle of their terror, something else was at work. A voice, smooth as silk and sweet as poison, echoed across the world's airwaves. Claire turned her gaze toward a massive screen, one of millions of broadcasts now playing across a planet. And there, his image displayed in flawless, high definition, was Adrian Lucero. Handsome, polished, eyes filled with an eerie, calculated warmth. His voice wrapped around the hearts of the broken. Do not fear, we are not alone. We will rise together, stronger than before. But Claire saw what was really happening. She gasped as, beyond the veil of human sight, creatures moved among the people. Demons. They slithered and prowled, their black, sinewy forms shifted like smoke. Some had wings of shadow. Others had hollowed-out eyes that burned red. They whispered into the ears of the desperate, curling their talons around the grieving and hopeless. Take the mark. Follow him. You will be safe. The deception was spreading like a virus. Mommy, Emily whimpered, pressing into Claire's side. They're everywhere. Claire tightened her grip on her daughter. I know, sweetheart. And then the air around them changed. A new force entered the battlefield. The war in the unseen realm. Claire looked up, her breath catching as the gates of heaven swung wide, and from them they came, the armies of the living God. Warriors clothed in light, armor gleaming like molten gold, their swords burning with fire, their wings stretching for miles, their eyes locked into war unfolding below. They stood in legions beyond number, lined in perfect ranks that filled the endless horizon. At their center, mounted on a white horse, stood the Prince of Heaven himself, Michael. The archangel's face was set like flint, his sword already drawn, its blade glowing with divine fire. He raised his head, his gaze falling upon the demonic legions now spreading their darkness across the earth. Hold the line, his voice rang out like thunder, until the appointed time. Lightning cracked through the skies, and at once the angelic warriors descended. Claire and Emily watched in awe as in heaven's army clashed with hell's forces, an unseen war raging over the heads of mankind. Where the demons whispered lies, the angels fought back, their blades cutting through the shadows, their light piercing the deception. They guarded those who still had a chance to see the truth. But for every soul who refused to listen, the enemy grew stronger. Adrian Lucero smiled, unaware of the battle raging beyond his sight. He believed he was in control. He did not know that behind him, a darker force watched. Claire's stomach turned as the shadows deepened, coiling into a monstrous form. And then she saw him, Lucifer, the fallen one. His presence was colder than death itself, his eyes burning like twin black stars. His wings were vast, no longer white but torn and shadowed, the remnants of what had once been. His mouth curved into a serpentine smile as he watched Adrian with amusement. His voice slithered through the void, echoing in a twisting mockery of divine power. The world is mine now. Michael's voice rang out in defiance. It was never yours to claim. And with a cry that shook the very foundation of eternity, the battle raged on. Back on Earth, Ethan and Daniel's breaking point. As the unseen war erupted, Ethan sat in the darkness of their home, his face pale, his hands clutching Claire's Bible. He could feel something, a tension in the air, a war beyond his senses. He wasn't sure what he believed anymore, but one thing was clear: the world had changed forever, and the fight for their souls had only just begun.